Hello everyone and welcome to the program Business Point on Global Television. I am Samuel Odi. Many thanks for joining on today's edition of the program. Today we'll be looking at the rebasing and the revamping of Nigerian economy, and as the MBS and the Economic Standard are looking forward to, change the current inflation and then rebasing of the Nigerian economy. Nigeria's current inflation measures are undergoing a significant transformation with the rebasing of the inflation basket. The National Bureau of Statistics is updating the Consumer Price Index and gross domestic products to reflect the country's changing economic landscape. This MBS plans to change the base year for real GDP consumption to 2019 from 2010, which is expected to increase the nominal economic balance sheet. The inflation basket will also be rebased, with the price reference period changing to 2024 from 2009. Additionally, the MBS will adjust the weighting of items in the CPI basket using the 2023 reference period and increase the number of items in the CPI basket to 960 naira from 740 naira. Rebasing exercise aims to provide a more accurate reflection of Nigeria's economy, enhancing policy accuracy and investor confidence. The update frameworks are expected to strengthen Nigeria's economic management system and solidify its position as a leading economic force in Africa. Some of these benefits of rebasing in the Nigerian economy includes enhancing policy accuracy. More precise facial and monetary data will be informed with policy decision, and also increase investors' confidence. A clearer and a more reliable dimension of the economy will attract investors. Improve global comparity. Nigeria's economy indicators will align with international standard practices. The MBS expects to launch this result of rebasing exercise by the end of January 2025 after its validation. So looking at all of this now, we'll be having a conversation around revamping the Nigerian inflation basket, as well as also revamping rebasing of the Nigerian economy. I have a guest who is joining me virtually from Scotland, who would help us understand most of these talking points. Before we get on right into the conversation, we'll be going on a quick break, and then we'll return back. We'll get right into it. Please do stay with us. many thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining, you're almost on time because we are about to get right into the conversation. Good morning, Bello Mohammed. Bello Mohammed is an economist who is joining all the way from Scotland. He's going to help us understand most of our talking point for today. Good morning, Bello.
Yeah, good morning, Samuel. Nice to have you this morning.
And Happy New Year to you, and thank you for joining on to this edition of the program.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
So now let's get right into the conversation. Revamping of the Nigerian inflation basket and also the CPI. So now let's look at it. What is your reaction to this current stage of Nigerian economy? You know, the economy has actually not been what a lot of people projected it to be, looking at what happened last year. So now, let's say revamping of the current Nigerian inflation basket. How do you react to that?
Yeah, so thank you so much for this interesting topic. I think this is something that is gathering momentum across all the space in Nigeria when it comes to discussion around economics. The GDP rebasing and the revamping of the inflation basket. So initially, when this administration presented it budget, I think last few months, they presented an inflation target of 15%. That okay, by next year 2025 we are going to bring down the inflation to 15%. And this has also, many economics and policy makers have reacted negatively to this target, saying that well, this target is too ambitious and this target is too realistic, because if you take a look at it from the trend of inflation as of November was around 34.6%. That's in 2024 just recently, and the government saying that they are going to bring it down to 15%, which is almost by 50% drop. It kind of point that this is unrealistic, and coupled with the fact that there are no any plans on ground to say, okay, this is what we intend to do, right? For you to say that we are going to bring inflation to 15%, you must have led them some prospect to say, okay, these are our intended objectives, this is how we intend to bring down the inflation. The only key policy that the government have been moving so far is the NPR, consistently increasing the NPR over time, hiking it to the highest momentum. And even with that, the inflation has not eased, because from the coming of this administration to this period, current period, I think the NPR has been increased to almost about 13 times, and within this period inflation will cool down for just like 2 months, I think. Yeah, and even in that period it was argued that it was due to the harvest period and all. So I don't know where this idea, initially this plan has been on ground that we are going to revamp the GDP and we are going to base the GDP on the inflation basket and all. But I don't really know the idea of like bringing it now at this particular moment when the economy is being faced with a lot of challenges that needs to really be addressed, and policy put in place to like put the economy in play part. So this idea of rebuilding it is something that is being recommended by the United Nations Statistical Commission. Okay, you guys, every economy should ideally rebase its economy after 5 years. So, but the last time Nigeria did this one was around 2014, I think 2014 to this year. It's about, I think, 11 years if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so it kind of points to, okay, what are we doing it now? Why not in period before now? So people would argue about the necessity of this thing right now, but then to many people it may just appear that, okay, maybe the government is just trying to buttress its point, that they are going to cool down the inflation to 15%, and this is why they are rebuilding the GDP. They are also revamping the inflation basket to include some other indicators that were not included before. So it is a whole lot of discussion right now, and there are a lot of faces to it. It has its own positive side and it has its own negative side too.
before 2014, 2009 was the year that this rebasing happened before 2014. Now we didn't get to witness that again. So due to some economic instability globally, the NBA said they are going to resort to 2019 as that when we come to the rebasing of the economy. Why do you think they need to use that? Why wouldn't we say 2020, 2021 and all of or maybe back forward to 2019? Why do you think they had to go back to 2019 instead of 2010?
I think the idea of this rebellion is just to like reflect, kind of make the economy reflect with the current reality. And if you ask me, I would say, 2019 from my own viewpoint is even too far. We have something like, let's say, 2020 and 2022. But then the argument that the, Nigerian law statistic, posited was that 2019 there was kind of economic stability compared to later years, let's say 2020 and then subsequently 2021 and 2022, because this COVID-19 pandemic that happened toward the end of 2019 to 2020 and then to some part of 2021, it has disrupted economic activities globally and even at the local economy. So there has been some policy shifts and economic structural changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So the reasons for the choice of 2019 was that 2019 was a more stable economic year compared to the later period. And I think if you look at it from this angle, I think the reason for the selection of 2019 is a little bit fear in this regard. So, and 2019 cannot stay far from 2019. If things went right, it will be able to reflect the current economic reality, but not really.
Okay, if we are looking at these angles now, Bello, what can you say now, or how important is this end of this revamping? Basically, how important is it to one economy? And do you think Nigerians actually, the common Nigerian, do you think a common Nigerian really care about the revamping or the rebasing of the current economic situation? And do you think, again, that currently as we speak, that this rebasing is going to get down to ground zero, looking at our current inflation measures and then the current exchange rate and then the instability of the current naira to dollar exchange rate?
Someone that's an interesting perspective, and the issue of revamping, the average Nigerian has little or nothing to do with it. Mostly the issue of revamping, it's kind of something that influences government decision and policy makers. As an individual or as an average Nigerian, the only impact that an average Nigerian may see in the GDP developing maybe is in the increase in the GDP per capita, because when the GDP is very revamped, definitely there's going to be a kind of expansion in the GDP that is being reported. And if there is this kind of expansion, definitely the current GDP per capita is going to expand. But that does not necessarily mean that, okay, GDP per capita has expanded, and which is highlighting that there is increase in the standard of living, there is increase in the living condition of average Nigerian. But does that really mean that, because they have just increased the number has expanded, the GDP per capita has expanded, then the livelihood of an average Nigerian has improved? No. It doesn't mean that there has to be a kind of true translation of this expansion in the GDP and GDP per capita for an average Nigerian to feel the impact. But these are majorly things that has to do with policy makers. The government now are the one interested more in the development of the GDP, because we are looking at ways to see, okay, how can we meet our target, how can we meet our set objectives, how can we address this issue, and how can we do this? So, and these are some of the things that influence policy decision. We say, okay, our GDP is so percent, our debt to GDP ratio is so percent, and with this we'll be able to borrow more. And okay, if the GDP increase, for instance, now the debt to GDP ratio is likely going to reduce, which will point to say, okay, the country debt debt is not as much as it is, and now the government can repay the debt without enough borrowing, without relying much more on borrowing, which is not really true. So but then, as I said earlier, this is just for the policy maker to be able to coordinate their policy and see how they can be able to achieve their set target. To me, I don't think it really reflects, it has any impact on an average Nigerian. The only impact, as I said earlier, is in the expansion of the GDP per capita, which may not necessarily reflect the true average, the true current reality of an average Nigerian.
Well, talking about truth now and accurate numbers, some other financial economists have been able to react differently, that the NBS is actually not being forthcoming with the actual number of Nigerians' current inflationary measures, and then with the current backlogs of Nigerian GDP as we speak. So you now, as a researcher, I'm sure very well aware that you've been following through Nigerian economy, though you are not at home, but you've been following through as a researcher and as an economist. How would you say that the rebasing of this Nigerian GDP and revamping of the economy, and then the numbers are actually being what they say they are by the NBS?
You see, there is this issue of data independence and integrity that we have been faced with Nigeria. You find it very difficult to say NBS is, reporting, false statistics, and, it's not really be the case. But then if you take a look at it, that what are they doing? And these institutions ideally are supposed to be independent, but the interference of the government sends a kind of lack of confidence in the public as to the numbers that they are publishing every day. Because every day you see kind of interference from the government. The government are trying to influence the decision that the NBS are making, sometimes even influence the reports that they are being produced. If you can recall, just recently the NBS published a report on kind of issues that has to do with insecurity, kidnappings and all, and how much ransom have been collected over time, which is a very good report that reflects the true state of insecurity in the country. But then after some few days, the NBS website was even shut down completely to say, okay, first it started with the post that, okay, the NBS website has been hacked, which is, pointing toward to say, okay, that report was uploaded not by NBS or something like that. We all know the situation that may likely result from, such kind of scenarios. So this kind of interference, up to now as I speak to you, even yesterday I tried to access some data from the NBS website, but the data is still down as I speak to you now. And these kind of things are some of the things that, if you put it together, get to see that, okay, is NBS really independent, and the data that they are reporting, does it really reflect the true state of the things in Nigeria currently? And it brings us down to this issue of repealing, bumping and all. You ask yourself whether these things that are doing is, really to reflect the true nature of the economy, or to hide and whitewash things to maybe say that, okay, things are going well. This kind of thought, because I think this issue, when I had of this issue of rebellion, I now thought of, okay, the unemployment, unemployment kind of rebellion, the unemployment indicator that was, changed and tweaked, to reflect, because that other time, I think unemployment was around, 20-something%, but after the change, it was down to currently around 4.5% if I'm not wrong. So you see this kind of
4.5% currently.
Yeah, 4.5% currently, and from about 20%. So you can see, and the nature of unemployment has not really changed. So you're saying that, okay, the unemployment rate now is 4.5%. While people know that a lot of people in the economy are jobless, don't have any job, they are, just moving around the street and all. So it kind of say, is this really the reality? Is this really the reality? And when it's down to inflation data, people are complaining that things are increasing every day. But inflation data, even though very high, but still people are saying that it doesn't really reflect the current reality, because if you go to the market, you find things very differently. If you compare,
Yes. As we await MBS
yeah,
to tend to answer all of those questions, like you rightly mentioned, the website was actually down and still is, because I also tried getting information and I couldn't. So we are hoping for the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics to be able to answer to all of this. Now, you are making mention of the MBS being totally independent, which is something we would want to know, and the MBS, we await them to answer those questions. So looking at this revamping on the rebasing of the GDP as we speak, do you think it's going, the inflation is actually going to get to a single digit mark, just like we see in Europe? And then there are other illegalities that is happening in the country that the MBS don't get to report, but other part of the world, as in Europe and co, they get to report all of that, which helps the economy. Now, do you think it's morally right or business-wise right not to have those reports in the MBS?
yeah, I think you see it's kind of global practice to include almost all economic activities in the economy, just to reflect the true nature of the economy. Initially, we didn't have this kind of whole and inclusive kind of indicators into the Nigerian GDP. For instance, now the GDP division is looking at trying to include some other activities, even illegal, like things like prostitution and stuff, and other hidden activities in the economy, which is something that is being done in other developed countries across Europe, for instance. But then our institutional framework are not really the same. If you go through some of these countries, some of these practices are even something that is being recognized by their institutions, by their constitutions and all. But our institutions, is it something that we really agree on, or is it something that we are really going to, for instance, because we are thinking of saying, okay, we are going to include things like prostitution into the GDP. Someone may see it as a kind of way to encourage these kind of activities to continue happening in the economy, even though they will definitely expand the economy, right? So, but when we look at it from institutional framework and kind of ethical framework in the country, I think we have kind of different institutional and ethical framework that guides our country compared to say countries like Denmark that have this kind of things included in their GDP and all.
All right. Thank you so much. Time is not our friend, though I still have more questions to ask. But thank you so much, Mohamed Bello, for joining on today's edition of Business Points. Hope to have you again soon. Hopefully, when the MBS releases its inflation measures for the fourth quarter. Okay, before we go, what are your expectations for the first quarter of 2025 in terms of the inflation?
Well, my expectation is, unless if maybe you see this rebellion is going to take place effectively starting from January 2025, and my own perception about the thing is we may likely see growth in the reported figures of inflation, right, because of the GDP rebellion and the inclusion of some other indicators into the inflation basket. So we may likely see drop in the reported figures, but then it might not really mean that inflation has dropped. Without this rebellion, I foresee inflation persisting into 2025, maybe up to mid-2025 before maybe we can see some ease. But then we wait now to see whether this rebellion is going to be implemented before the next inflation report is being released. And until then, we have our hands full there to see what is going to happen. But the inflation is going to remain high until mid-2025. That's my own opinion regarding inflation in Nigeria.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mohamed Bello, for taking our time to join us on today's edition of Business Points, and we'll hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a nice day.
Yes, you too. And that's how much time will permit us to take. A whole lot of economics researchers and policy analysts have actually argued that Nigerian inflation is going to remain high until mid-2025. We'll await and see what the Q4 of 2024 data would be saying, and again we'll then use that to analyze and see what's going to happen in the next couple of months, given the fact that the rebasing result and everything is actually going to be released at the end of January 2025. My name is Samuel Odi. I'll see you again as we talk more business tomorrow. Bye for now.